Close your eyes for a second. In 1980, roughly 40 million American kids woke up before their parents on Saturday morning, and none of them needed an alarm. You're 7 years old. It's Saturday, and nobody is going to tell you what to do for the next 6 hours. You know that feeling, that very specific feeling of waking up before anyone else in the house, rolling out of bed in your socks, tiptoeing past your parents' closed door, and turning on the TV as quietly as humanly possible. If you grew up in 1980s America, that Saturday morning feeling is locked somewhere so deep inside you it never really left. Today, we're going back. Before Netflix, before YouTube, before you could watch anything you wanted, anytime you wanted, there was a schedule. And that schedule, that one specific block of time every single week, was sacred. From roughly 1972 all the way through the early 1990s, the three major TV networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS, programmed something almost miraculous every Saturday morning. 4 to 6 uninterrupted hours of cartoons, exclusively for kids. No parents asking them to turn it off, no school tomorrow, no responsibilities, just joy. But here's what people forget and what makes this era truly special. Saturday morning wasn't just a time slot, it was a ritual, a culture, a way of life that millions of American kids shared simultaneously, like a giant invisible sleepover that stretched from Maine to California. Every Saturday, at roughly the same time, across the country, kids were doing the exact same thing. And that shared experience, that's something we've never had since and may never have again.
Let me walk you through it. A Saturday morning in 1983. Let's say it's October. Your alarm didn't go off. You didn't need an alarm. Your body just knew. 6:30 a.m. Eyes open. The house is completely dark and quiet. And for one beautiful second, you just remembered. It's Saturday. You moved fast, but carefully. The mission had rules. Rule number 1, do not wake up mom and dad. Their bedroom door was like a border crossing. You didn't knock, you didn't breathe too loud near it. Rule number 2, get to the TV first. If you had a brother or sister, and God help you if you had two, this was a race. The first one to the living room controlled the remote. And in the 1980s, the remote was sometimes literally you because a lot of families still had to change the channel by hand. You'd wrap yourself in a blanket, or better yet, drag your pillow and sleep right there on the carpet, as close to the TV as physically possible. Then came the most important decision of the week. What are you eating? The cereal. Oh, the cereal. The 1980s cereal aisle was basically a candy store that had tricked your parents into thinking it was breakfast. We had Count Chocula, Fruit Loops, Cocoa Puffs, Lucky Charms, Cap'n Crunch, which absolutely destroyed the roof of your mouth, and you ate it anyway. You'd pour yourself a bowl, a massive bowl, we're talking industrial amounts, and you'd carry it carefully like you were carrying nitroglycerin back to your spot on the carpet. And then you'd sit down, and the screen would flicker, and the cartoons would begin.
Now let's talk about the shows themselves, because the 1980s Saturday morning lineup was something extraordinary. On ABC, you might wake up to Scooby-Doo, which had been running since 1969 and still somehow felt fresh. Then came the Smurfs, little blue creatures living in mushroom houses, which sounds completely insane, but was somehow the #1 rated Saturday morning show for years. Over on NBC, you had Alvin and the Chipmunks, the 1983 revival, which was a genuine cultural phenomenon. Kids didn't just watch it, they memorized every episode. They owned the records. They dressed up as Alvin for Halloween. And then there was CBS, which, for a few golden years in the mid-'80s, might have had the most legendary lineup of all, because CBS had something called the Dungeons and Dragons animated series. For a 6-year-old, watching a group of kids get trapped in a magical world and fight actual monsters, that was not a cartoon, that was a religious experience. And then there was syndication, the cartoons that ran on local channels. He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, She-Ra, Thundercats, G.I. Joe, the Transformers. These weren't just shows, they were mythologies. He-Man had a castle, he had enemies, he had moral lessons at the end of every episode that were so sincerely delivered that even a 7-year-old could feel the love behind them. And knowing is half the battle, G.I. Joe. These shows believed in you. They believed kids deserved big adventures and complex heroes and emotional stakes. They weren't cynical, they weren't ironic, they were just full of wonder. Here's something that sounds bizarre in 2024. The commercials on Saturday morning were almost as exciting as the shows. Because Saturday morning commercials in the 1980s were specifically, brilliantly, ruthlessly designed for one purpose: to make every kid in America want something so badly that they would ask their parents for it until the end of time. Toy commercials were their own art form. They had their own cinematographers, their own music composers, their own editing style. You'd see a Hot Wheels track, and the commercial would film it like it was the actual Monaco Grand Prix. The cars would fly through loop-de-loops in slow motion. There'd be dramatic music. A kid would look at the camera with pure triumph. And you'd think, I need that. I need that more than I need food or sleep. I need that more than I've ever needed anything in my life. And then your parents would take you to Toys R Us, and the actual toy would be roughly 40% smaller than it appeared on television, and somehow you'd love it just as much anyway. Saturday morning commercials were also where we learned about things like Schoolhouse Rock, educational shorts that ran between cartoons and taught us grammar and the Constitution and how a bill becomes a law through catchy songs. I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill. If you're an American of a certain age, that song is permanently installed in your brain. You will still know every word when you're 80 years old.
I want to slow down for a moment, because this isn't really a story about cartoons or cereal or commercials. It's a story about what it means to be a child in a specific place and time, and why that time, those Saturday mornings, felt so different from anything before or since. In the 1980s, childhood had space. Kids were largely unsupervised in ways that sound almost dangerous by today's standards. You went outside. You came home when the streetlights came on. Your parents didn't know exactly where you were for hours at a time, and nobody panicked about it. But Saturday morning was different. Saturday morning was indoors. Saturday morning was yours. It was one of the few times in a kid's week that the whole family slowed down, almost involuntarily. Dad was still asleep, Mom was still asleep, the world outside was quiet, and for those few hours, the only thing that existed was the glow of that television screen and the feeling that everything was fine. Everything was fine. Narration, personal, almost confessional. If you grew up in an imperfect home, and most of us did in one way or another, Saturday mornings might have been one of the few places where that imperfection temporarily disappeared. The bills your parents were worried about didn't exist between 7 and 11 a.m. on a Saturday. The fight they had on Friday night didn't matter when Scooby-Doo was on. The loneliness that sometimes crept in during the week, the awkward kid years, the not fitting in years, couldn't reach you when you were wrapped in a blanket watching He-Man save the universe. Saturday morning
was a sanctuary. And the remarkable thing is, every kid in America had one. Narration. There's a particular kind of American loneliness that comes with being the only one who remembers something. But Saturday mornings in the 1980s are not that. Saturday mornings are communal. They belong to all of us. 40 million American kids on the same morning, watching the same shows, eating the same cereal, feeling the same freedom. That's not nostalgia. That's history. We live in a world now where everything is available always. Every show, every movie, every song, instantly, on demand, in your pocket. And it is wonderful. It truly is. But there is something we lost in that trade. We lost the Saturday morning feeling. We lost the experience of anticipation, of knowing that something good was coming and waiting for it. We lost the shared moment, millions of kids all watching the same thing at the same time, together and alone. We lost the sanctuary of 6 hours that belonged entirely to you. If you were there, if you remember waking up before the sun on a Saturday morning and tiptoeing to that TV and unwrapping yourself in that blanket and pouring that bowl of cereal, then you know something that no amount of streaming will ever replicate. You know what it felt like when the world was simple, when Saturday was an event, when the most important decision you'd make all week was whether to watch Scooby-Doo or He-Man. And somewhere inside you, that kid is still there, still waking up early, still tiptoeing to the TV, still waiting for the magic to begin. Thanks for coming back with us.